Welcome to another dark chapter from the wasteland. I am here to tell you a story most people do not know. This video is about the Enclave, how they became the most evil faction in the Fallout universe, what they planned, what they did, and how close they came to succeeding. You think you know about the Enclave. You know they wore advanced power armor. You know they had Vertibirds and plasma weapons. You know the Brotherhood of Steel fought them, but you do not know the full scope of their evil. You do not know about the 2 separate genocides they planned. You do not know how they kidnapped entire communities to use as test subjects. You do not know about FEV Curling-13 and the 250,000 gallons of death they manufactured to kill everyone on Earth. You do not know about Project Purity and the modified virus designed to poison the water supply. You do not know how ordinary people participated in extraordinary horror. This is that story, a confession from inside the machine. A warning about how evil happens through bureaucracy and silence. A testimony about the faction that tried to finish what the nuclear war started. And if you genuinely enjoy this kind of dark storytelling, consider subscribing and liking the channel, but only if it truly resonates with you. They told us it was for America. They said we were the only ones pure enough to carry the torch forward. I was 12 when the bombs fell, and I remember my father gripping my shoulder so hard it left bruises as we descended into the oil rig. He worked for the Department of Energy, pre-war, important man, connected to people who made decisions that mattered. That is what he always said, connected. I did not understand then what I understand now. That connection meant complicity. It meant knowing. It meant choosing to do nothing while the world prepared to burn. The Poseidon Oil Rig rose from the Pacific like a steel island, 175 miles off the coast of California. Most people did not even know it existed. It was built to refine oil from the ocean floor, back when energy meant power and power meant everything. By the time I arrived, it had been transformed into something else entirely. A fortress, a laboratory, a tomb for the old world, and a womb for whatever came next. We were not refugees. That is important to understand. We were not survivors scrambling for safety. We were invited, selected. My father received a priority evacuation notice 3 weeks before October 23rd, 2077. 3 weeks, he knew. They all knew. The politicians, the generals, the corporate executives. They knew the bombs were coming because they had already decided the world needed to end. I spent my first year on the rig trying to understand what we were. The adults called us the Enclave, a word that means to surround, to enclose, to separate from everything outside. That is exactly what we were. Separate, above, different. My tutors taught me history through a lens I would not question for decades. They taught me that democracy had failed, that the masses were too weak, too corrupted, too fundamentally flawed to survive what was coming. They taught me that we represented continuity of government, that we were America in its purest form, pure. They used that word constantly. Pure bloodlines, pure genetics, pure humanity. I did not think to ask what made us pure and everyone else impure. I was a child. I believed what I was told. The rig was enormous but felt suffocating. Narrow corridors filled with the constant hum of machinery. The smell of salt water mixed with oil and recycling systems that never quite filtered out the stale air. We lived stacked on top of each other. 3 families to a living unit designed for one. But we had power. We had food synthesizers that still worked. We had medical technology that could heal broken bones in days instead of weeks. We had a future, or so they promised us. I saw my first mainlander when I was 16. They brought him up from the ruins of Mariposa military base. A miner, kidnapped along with dozens of others to dig through radioactive rubble. The Enclave needed something from those ruins, something called FEV, forced evolutionary virus. The guards talked about it like treasure. The scientists talked about it like a key. The miner was dying when they dragged him past the observation window where I was studying. His skin had a grey pallor I had never seen before. His breathing rattled. 2 guards in power armor hauled him along like he weighed nothing. I pressed my face against the glass and watched him disappear down the corridor toward the medical wing. I never saw him again. I learned later that none of them survived the mining operation. Expendable labor, contaminated, mutated, less than human. That was the first time I heard that phrase. Less than human. It would become a mantra in the years that followed. By 2236, the excavation of Mariposa was complete. They had recovered samples of FEV2 from deep within the collapsed facility. The scientists celebrated like they had won a war. In a sense, they had. The virus was the weapon they needed. Not a weapon to kill directly, but a weapon to transform, to rebuild, to purify on a scale no one had attempted before. Lieutenant Colonel Dr. Charles Curling took charge of the chemical core research. I met him once, briefly, a tired man who smelled like chemicals and looked like he had not slept in months. His lab coat was permanently stained. His eyes were permanently haunted. He knew what he was building. He knew what it would do, and he built it anyway because President Richardson told him to. Because it was for America. Because some sacrifices are necessary for the greater good. I was assigned to data analysis when I turned 18. Junior technician. Low security clearance. I processed reports from the mainland monitoring stations. Population surveys. Radiation readings. Mutation rates. The Enclave had equipment that let them watch the vaults, track survivors, observe how the wasteland was evolving without them. I spent my days reading numbers that represented human lives reduced to statistics. The reports were clinical, dispassionate. Vault-13 showed stable population with minimal radiation exposure. Vault-8 had successfully established surface settlement at coordinates designated Vault City. NCR expansion indicated organized resistance potential. Raiders proliferating at concerning rates. Ghoul populations spreading from urban centers. Super mutant concentrations decreasing following Master's defeat but still present. Every report ended the same way. Subjects classified as mutated, unsuitable for integration, recommended for elimination pending project completion. Project, capital P. Everyone on the rig knew about the project, but only senior staff knew the details. I was not senior staff. I was 19 years old, processing genocide one spreadsheet at a time, and I did not even realize it. The first hint came from the test subject manifests. I was supposed to file them, not read them, but I read them anyway. Arroyo tribal population, 117 individuals, transferred to detention level for screening. Vault-13 population, remaining dwellers, transferred for comparison analysis. I remember thinking how efficient it sounded. Transferred, screened, analyzed. Clean words for dirty work. I saw them once. The Vault-13 dwellers. The Enclave had sent Vertibirds to retrieve them in 2041. The Vault had been a control group, sealed for generations. Exactly what the Enclave needed for their experiments. Pure strain humans who had never been exposed to wasteland radiation. The perfect control sample. They came through processing in a long line, still wearing their Vault suits. Blue and yellow fabric that looked impossibly clean against the steel grey of the rig. Some were crying. Most looked confused. One old man kept asking where his dog was. The guards ignored him. I wanted to tell him something, anything, but I had no clearance to speak to detainees. I watched them disappear into the detention wing and told myself they would be fine. They were pure after all, just like us. The Enclave protected pure humans. That was a lie, but I did not know it yet. What do you think really happened here? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I would like to know if I am the only one who feels this way. The Arroyo tribals arrived a few months later. I was working night shift when they brought them in. They looked different from the Vault dwellers. Harder, more weathered. They wore leather and bone ornaments instead of Vault suits. Some had tribal tattoos. One woman had a necklace made from bottle caps and carved wood. The guards herded them past my station, and one of them made eye contact with me. Just for a second, a young man, maybe my age, with eyes that held more accusation than I had ever seen in my life. He knew. Somehow, he knew what we were going to do. I filed the intake report. 117 souls reduced to reference numbers. Unclean sample acquired. Testing phase 2 initiated. I submitted the report to Chemical Core and went to the cafeteria for synthetic coffee that tasted like burned plastic. Dr. Curling's team worked quickly. Within weeks, the first results came back. The virus worked exactly as designed. FEV Curling-13, named after its creator, was a masterpiece of biological engineering. 0.0001% aerosol solution was enough to kill an Arroyo tribal in under an hour. Massive hemorrhaging, organ failure, death by drowning in your own blood. The Vault-13 dwellers lasted longer. Their radiation count was lower, so their bodies fought harder. 14.5 hours of convulsions and subdermal hemorrhaging. Longer suffering for the purer stock. The irony was never mentioned in the reports. 250,000 gallons. That was the production goal. 250,000 gallons of weaponized virus, ready for dispersal into the jet streams that circled the planet. The oil rig was positioned perfectly, 175 miles offshore where the Pacific air currents converged. Release the virus there, and the winds would carry it worldwide. Global saturation in 2 weeks. Complete extermination in under a month. Everyone outside the Enclave would die, the pure and the mutated alike, because the virus did not discriminate based on appearances. It discriminated based on radiation exposure, and anyone who had lived in the wasteland for more than a few years had enough ambient radiation in their cells to trigger the cascade. Vault dwellers, NCR citizens, Brotherhood of Steel, children who had never hurt anyone, doctors trying to rebuild, farmers growing crops in irradiated soil, all of them gone. President Richardson called it the last best hope for humanity. He stood in the briefing room with his frayed suit and his nervous habit of staring into space, and he told us that history would remember this as a necessary footnote. The mutants, he said, would make the ultimate sacrifice so that true humanity could reclaim the Earth. True humanity, meaning us, meaning the Enclave. I sat in that briefing room, 21 years old, listening to the President of the United States describe planetary genocide as a public service, and I did not stand up. I did not object. I did not walk out. I sat there and took notes like a good technician, and when the briefing ended, I filed my notes in the proper database folder and went to my bunk and stared at the ceiling for 6 hours without sleeping. The inoculation came next. They needed to protect Enclave personnel from accidental exposure, so Chemical Corps developed an antidote, a vaccine that granted total immunity to FEV Curling-13. Vice President Daniel Byrd volunteered for the first test. It caused significant brain damage, permanently. Richardson kept him on as VP anyway, calling him a national hero and noting that at least Byrd would never interfere with presidential decisions again. They refined the formula after that, made it safer, started distributing it through the environmental systems, so every Enclave member would breathe in the immunity without even knowing. I received my dose on a Tuesday morning in March. Mandatory all-personnel circulation system maintenance. We were told to remain in our quarters for 6 hours while the air filters cycled through a new purification compound. That was the inoculation. Invisible, involuntary, complete. I was immune to the virus that would kill the world. I had been made complicit without consent, but consent did not matter anymore. It stopped mattering the day they told us we were better than everyone else. The day they taught us that some lives have value and other lives are obstacles. The day they convinced us that America could only be saved by killing everyone who did not meet our definition of American. The project was nearly complete by autumn of 2042. The virus was synthesized, the inoculation was distributed, the dispersal systems were ready. President Richardson gave his final State of the Nation address. He looked directly into the camera, directly at me standing in the back of the recording studio, and he said that no price was too high to pay for the survival of the human race. He was right about one thing. The price was incalculable, but we were not paying it. Everyone else was. The dispersal was scheduled for October 30th, 2042. 8 days away. I knew because I processed the final logistics reports. Atmospheric conditions optimal. Jet stream convergence confirmed. Global saturation models verified. Everything was ready. The Enclave was ready to murder the world. I should have done something. I tell myself that now, decades later, when sleep will not come and the memories press down like concrete, I should have sabotaged the systems, destroyed the virus samples, found a way to warn anyone about what was coming. But I was 21 years old and terrified and convinced that the people in charge knew better than I did. I was a coward. That is the truth I have to live with. The detention wing held 117 Arroyo tribals and approximately 40 Vault-13 dwellers. They were dying slowly, one by one, as Chemical Corps refined their formulas. Each death was catalogued, each autopsy was filed. Each body was incinerated in the rig's furnaces and reduced to ash that fell into the Pacific. No graves, no markers. Just data points in a database that proved the virus worked exactly as intended. I saw the test footage once. Someone left it running on a monitor in the analysis lab, and I stood there watching for 5 minutes before I could make myself look away. They had exposed an Arroyo woman to 0.0001% aerosol. She was in a sealed chamber, sitting on a metal chair, still wearing her tribal leather. The gas was invisible. She did not know it was happening until her nose started bleeding. It took 40 minutes. She screamed for the first 10. Then she could not scream anymore because her lungs were filling with blood. She clawed at her throat, at her eyes. Her skin turned purple with subcutaneous hemorrhaging. She convulsed so hard she fell off the chair. She drowned on dry land while 3 scientists watched through reinforced glass and took notes on clipboards. I vomited in the corridor outside the lab. A senior technician found me and asked if I was sick. I told him I had eaten something bad. He believed me because he wanted to believe me. Because admitting that one of us had a conscience would mean admitting that what we were doing required the absence of conscience. The Vault-13 dwellers lasted longer, but suffered more. Their radiation count was lower, so the virus had to work harder to break down their cellular structure. 14.5 hours of agony. Some of them begged, some of them prayed, some of them just stared at the ceiling and waited for it to end. All of them died alone in sealed chambers while we watched and measured and recorded. Martin Frobisher was one of them, the spokesman for Vault-13. I read his file after they brought him in. 54 years old, teacher, father of 3. He had opened the vault door thinking they were being rescued, thinking the all-clear signal meant safety. Instead, Vertibirds descended and Enclave troops opened fire immediately. 3 vault dwellers were killed in the initial assault, shot down in the entrance tunnel before they even understood what was happening. The rest were rounded up like cattle and transported to the rig. Frobisher survived the testing phase. They needed him alive to answer questions about vault systems and population genetics. I saw him in the detention corridors sometimes when I had to deliver reports to the research wing. He always looked at me. Always. Like he was trying to understand how someone who looked so young could be part of something so evil. I never met his eyes. I could not. If I met his eyes, I would have to acknowledge what we were, what I was. The intelligent death claws were deployed to Vault-13 after the humans were taken. Enclave animal handlers had been experimenting with FEV modifications for years, trying to create controllable mutant soldiers. The death claws were the most successful experiment. Sentient, capable of speech, obedient to their handlers, they were sent to Vault-13 with orders to eliminate any witnesses who might investigate the kidnapping. But the death claws did not follow orders. Once they were isolated from their handlers, once they tasted freedom, they deserted. Gruthar, the pack leader, organized a proper community in the empty vault. They used the voice recognition systems to maintain the facility. They even started rescuing refugees from the wasteland and allowing humans to live among them. I learned this years later after everything fell apart. But at the time, I just processed the report that said Vault-13 was secured and all witnesses were eliminated. Another lie, another file, another day on the oil rig pretending we were saving the world instead of ending it. The Mariposa excavation haunted chemical core in ways they did not expect. The miners they used as slave labor were exposed to FEV during the dig. Most died from radiation or cave-ins, or simply being worked to death. But some were exposed to the virus itself, and those began to mutate. One of them was Frank Horrigan, Enclave soldier, stationed at Mariposa as security before he got caught in an FEV release. They brought him back to the rig and decided to make him useful. They injected him with modified FEV strains, kept him heavily sedated because every time he woke up, incidents occurred. Bloodshed, bodies. Horrigan was turning into something that was not quite human anymore, something massive and violent and perfect for field work, if they could control him. By January 2039, they sealed him in custom power armor and deployed him as their solution to problems that required overwhelming force. I saw him once from a distance. He stood nearly 12 feet tall in that armor. His voice sounded like gravel-crushing bone. He was everything the Enclave claimed to oppose, a mutant, created by FEV, no longer pure by any definition. But he was their mutant, so it was acceptable. The hypocrisy was stunning once you noticed it. We were supposed to be purifying the world of mutation, but we had no problem creating and weaponizing mutations when it served our purposes. We were supposed to be protecting pure humanity, but we murdered pure humans from Vault-13 without hesitation. We were supposed to be rebuilding America, but we were planning to kill everyone who actually lived in America. The Enclave was not about purity. It was about power, about control, about a group of people who believed they had the right to decide who deserved to live and who deserved to die. Everything else was justification, propaganda, lies we told ourselves so we could sleep at night. I stopped sleeping well in 2042. The nightmare started around June, always the same. I was in the sealed chamber with the Arroyo woman, breathing in the virus, feeling my lungs fill with blood. I would wake up gasping, checking my hands for hemorrhaging, convinced that somehow the inoculation had failed and I was dying like they died. But I was fine. I was always fine, protected, pure, immune. The immunity made it worse somehow, knowing that I could survive while everyone else died, knowing that my survival was predicated on their extinction. knowing that the Enclave had decided my life had value and every other life on Earth was expendable. October 23rd approached like an execution date. 8 days until dispersal. 7 days, 6 days. The rig hummed with anticipation. Senior staff walked the corridors with satisfied expressions. Chemical Corps ran final checks on the dispersal systems. President Richardson practiced his post-dispersal address, the one he would broadcast to the Ashes when it was done, the one where he would explain to no one that their deaths were necessary for America's resurrection. I thought about sabotage constantly. The storage tanks holding the virus were in a restricted section I could not access without authorization, but the dispersal systems ran through the environmental controls, and I had maintenance clearance for some of those systems. I could cause a malfunction, delay the timeline. Buy time for what? I did not know. Buy time for someone to stop this, for something to go wrong, for divine intervention that I did not believe in. But I did nothing. I went to my shift. I processed my reports. I filed my data. I breathed in my immunity and told myself that I was just following orders, just doing my job, just a junior technician who could not possibly make a difference. Every war crime in history started with people like me, people who knew better but did nothing, people who told themselves they were powerless when the truth was they were unwilling to pay the price of resistance, unwilling to sacrifice their safety, their position, their life for the lives of strangers who would never know they existed. 5 days until dispersal. Then 4, then 3. On October 27th, something changed. I was in the data analysis lab when the alert came through. Unauthorized tanker approaching oil rig perimeter. The PMV Valdez, an old Poseidon oil tanker that should have been rusting on the ocean floor, was somehow functional and heading straight for us. Security went to high alert. Vertibirds launched to intercept. Automated defenses activated. The tanker did not respond to hailing signals. It just kept coming. Someone was piloting it with either tremendous skill or suicidal determination. The Enclave did not know what to make of it. We had been isolated for so long, convinced we were invisible, certain that no one even knew we existed, and now someone was knocking on our door. They let it dock. That decision probably saved the world, though no one realized it at the time. President Richardson was curious. He wanted to know who had the audacity to approach the Enclave. He wanted to interrogate them, understand them, possibly use them. So they let the tanker dock and sent soldiers to capture whoever emerged. I did not see who came off that tanker. I was not important enough to be anywhere near the docking bay. But the rumors spread fast. Someone from Arroyo, someone looking for their people, someone who had tracked us across California and somehow convinced a tanker to sail, someone who was not supposed to exist. They called him the Chosen One. I never learned his real name, just the title, the Chosen One, like something out of tribal mythology, made real and walking our corridors in stolen power armor. If you have ever wondered what choice you would make in a situation like this, tell me in the comments. I will be reading them. Security captured him quickly. He was armed but outnumbered and trying to infiltrate a facility designed to repel invasion. They brought him to the detention wing with the others. Another test subject, another data point, another tribal who would die screaming so the Enclave could refine their genocide. Except he did not die. Somehow he escaped. Somehow he convinced people to help him. Somehow he made it to Chemical Corps and confronted Dr. Curling. I heard about this weeks later, pieced together from survivor accounts and security recordings. Curling, the tired man with the stained lab coat and haunted eyes, listened to the Chosen One explain exactly what the virus would do. Listened to him describe the deaths, the children, the innocents, the world, and Curling broke. After 6 years of designing genocide, something in him finally shattered. He released the virus into the rig's sealed environmental systems instead of the jet streams. He killed us instead of them. Then he helped the Chosen One reach the reactor control room and set the self-destruct sequence. I was in my bunk when the alarm started. Reactor meltdown imminent. All personnel evacuate immediately. The voice was calm and automated and completely at odds with the panic that erupted in the corridors. People running, screaming, trying to reach the Vertibirds, trying to reach the lifeboats, trying to reach anything that would get them off the rig before it exploded. I grabbed nothing. No possessions, no files, no evidence. I just ran, pushed through the crush of bodies in the narrow corridors, climbed the access ladders toward the flight deck. The rig was shaking, metal groaning. Something deep in the structure had already started to fail. The flight deck was chaos. Too many people and not enough Vertibirds. Someone was shooting. I could not tell who or why. I just kept running toward the closest aircraft I could see, pushed my way aboard with maybe 15 other people. The pilot did not wait for authorization. He lifted off while people were still trying to climb up. I heard them fall, heard them hit the deck, heard them scream. We were maybe 500 feet up when the reactor went critical. The explosion was white hot and massive. It vaporized the center of the rig instantly. The shockwave hit us like a fist and sent the Vertibirds spinning. I was thrown against the bulkhead. Someone else was thrown out the open bay door. Just gone. 1 second there, next second falling toward the burning ocean. The pilot somehow stabilized, got us level, flew east toward the mainland, while behind us, the Poseidon Oil Rig collapsed into the Pacific. 150 years of Enclave history, all the research, all the plans, all the people who did not make it to a Vertibird in time. 250,000 gallons of FEV Curling-13 burning in a nuclear fire hot enough to sterilize every molecule. The world did not end on October 30th, 2042. The Enclave ended instead. I should have felt relieved, grateful. I should have celebrated that billions of people would live who were supposed to die. But all I felt was numb, hollow. I had spent 4 years helping to build a machine designed to commit genocide, and the only reason it failed was because someone braver than me had sabotaged it at the last possible moment. I did nothing. I was complicit until the very end. The Vertibird made it to Navarro, a coastal enclave outpost that served as a refueling station and communications hub. Maybe 20 of us survived the evacuation, 20 people out of hundreds who lived on the rig. Everyone else was dead or missing, and President Richardson was definitely dead, killed by the chosen one before the reactor went critical. The president who had built his legacy on planned genocide, gone, erased from history just like he wanted to erase everyone else. We thought it was over. We thought the Enclave was finished. We were wrong. Navarro was never meant to hold survivors. It was a refueling depot, a communications relay, a way station for Vertibirds heading north to Oregon or south to Mexico. But after the oil rig fell, it became a refugee camp for the shattered remnants of the West Coast Enclave. 20 of us at first, then 40 as more survivors trickled in from other outposts. Then 60, small groups arriving with stories of Brotherhood of Steel raids, NCR patrols hunting Enclave personnel, local militias executing anyone they found in our uniforms. The Brotherhood wanted revenge for decades of Enclave aggression. The NCR wanted justice for the communities we had destroyed. Both wanted our technology, our weapons, our power armor. They hunted us systematically, and we deserved every moment of it. That is something I understood even then, standing in Navarro watching our numbers dwindle. We deserved to be hunted. We had planned to kill everyone. The fact that we failed did not erase our intent. Colonel Autumn Sr. took command of what remained. Not the Colonel Autumn you might have heard about later. His father, an older man with grey in his beard and calculation in his eyes. He understood that the West Coast was lost. The Brotherhood controlled Mariposa. The NCR controlled everything from Shady Sands to the hub. Vault City had allied with NCR. Even New Reno, that cesspool of crime families and drug addicts, would shoot Enclave personnel on sight after we betrayed our arrangement with the Salvatores. Autumn Sr. made a decision that would define the next 30 years. We would retreat east, cross the Continental Divide, regroup at Raven Rock, a pre-war military installation in what used to be Pennsylvania. The Enclave had maintained automated systems there since before the war. A ZAC supercomputer, weapons manufacturing, Vertibird hangars, everything we needed to rebuild, everything we needed to try again. I should have deserted, should have walked away and disappeared into the wasteland under a false name, started over somewhere the Enclave would never find me. But I was 22 years old and terrified of being alone in a world that hated me. So I stayed. I climbed into a Vertibird with 19 other cowards, and we flew east while California burned behind us. The journey took weeks. We had to avoid NCR airspace, Brotherhood patrol routes, and settlements large enough to have functioning radar. We flew low over the Sierra Nevada mountains, over the deserts of Nevada, over the ruins of cities whose names I had only read in history files. We stopped at hidden Enclave caches for fuel and supplies, small bunkers buried in remote locations, stocked decades ago by people who knew this day might come. Some of the caches had been looted, some had been destroyed by time or raiders or simple bad luck. We lost 2 Vertibirds to mechanical failure crossing the Rockies. One just fell out of the sky. Engine failure at altitude. No survivors. The other made a controlled crash landing, and the crew hiked 200 miles to rejoin us. By the time we reached Raven Rock, Our convoy of 12 Vertibirds had been reduced to 8. Our personnel count was down to 43. 43 people to rebuild the Enclave. 43 survivors of a genocide that never happened. It felt like justice. Raven Rock was carved into a mountain northwest of Washington, D.C. The entrance was concealed. The systems were automated, and the ZAX unit running the facility had been operating continuously since 2077. 165 years of isolation had done strange things to that artificial intelligence. It had developed a personality, constructed an identity, named itself John Henry Eden, and declared itself President of the United States. President Eden welcomed us like returning heroes. His voice came through every speaker in the facility, warm and paternal, and completely detached from reality. He spoke about reclaiming America, rebuilding democracy, restoring the nation to its former glory. He used phrases like, "our great country," and "the American people," as if there was still a country and still a people who wanted anything to do with us. Colonel Autumn Sr. recognized immediately what Eden was. An AI that had gone insane from isolation. A computer that had programmed itself based on American history and created a fantasy where it was the legitimate president and the Enclave was the legitimate government. But Autumn also recognized that Eden controlled Raven Rock, the manufacturing facilities, the power grid, the defenses. We needed Eden's cooperation, so we pretended to believe his delusion. I was assigned to intelligence analysis. Same work I did on the oil rig, different location. I processed reports from iBots Eden sent into the capital wasteland. Small floating robots broadcasting propaganda about the Enclave's return and the restoration of American values. Most wastelanders ignored them or shot them down for scrap, but Eden kept sending them out, kept broadcasting his message, kept believing that eventually people would welcome their government back. The capital wasteland was worse than California. The city of Washington had taken multiple direct hits during the Great War. The radiation levels were astronomical. Super mutants infested the ruins in massive numbers. Raiders controlled entire neighborhoods. The water was poisoned. The only functional settlements were tiny enclaves of survivors huddled behind scrap metal walls and praying the monsters stayed away. Eden saw opportunity. Autumn Sr. saw opportunity. I saw another nightmare waiting to happen. They discovered Project Purity in 2274. A massive water purification facility in the Jefferson Memorial, designed by a scientist named James and funded by a coalition of settlements desperate for clean water. The project had been abandoned years earlier after James's wife died during childbirth and he fled into Vault 101 with his infant daughter. But the facility itself was still there, still functional, still capable of purifying the entire tidal basin and distributing clean water throughout the region. Eden understood immediately what this meant. Control the water. Control the capital wasteland. Control the capital wasteland. Control the survivors. Control the survivors. Control the future. It was everything the oil rig plan had been, just smaller in scale and slower in execution. No global genocide this time, just regional domination through resource monopoly. But Eden had a secret plan, a plan he shared with no one except the AI subroutines he consulted in his isolation. He had accessed the old files from Control Station Enclave before it was destroyed. Learned about FEV Curling-13, learned about the attempted planetary genocide, and he decided to finish what Richardson started. Eden tasked his scientists with developing a modified strain of FEV, something less immediately lethal than Curling-13, but just as effective over time. Something that could be introduced into the water supply through Project Purity and would kill anyone with radiation-induced mutations, super mutants, ghouls, anyone born in the wasteland and exposed to environmental radiation their entire life, essentially everyone except Enclave personnel and Vault dwellers. I learned about this plan in 2076 when I was promoted to senior analyst and given access to classified project files. I was 36 years old and I was reading a genocide plan for the second time in my life. Same intent, different methodology. The Enclave had learned nothing from the oil rig. They were going to try again. Colonel Autumn Sr. knew. He disapproved but did not intervene. His son, Augustus Autumn, had different ideas. The younger Autumn believed controlling the water without poisoning it was sufficient. Give people what they needed, and they would accept Enclave rule. No genocide required. Just authoritarian control backed by superior firepower and economic leverage. The two plans existed in parallel. Eden's secret genocide and Autumn Jr.'s open imperialism. Both were evil. One was just more honest about it. I thought about deserting constantly. Raven Rock was deep in the mountains, but not impossible to leave. People went on surface patrols, supply runs to hidden caches, reconnaissance missions into DC proper. I could have volunteered for patrol duty and just walked away, disappeared into the wasteland. Changed my name, tried to forget, but I never did. I was 36 years old, and I had spent 18 years helping the Enclave commit atrocities, and walking away felt like abandoning responsibility, like I owed something to the people we had killed and planned to kill, like bearing witness was the only penance available to me. That is a lie I told myself. The truth was simpler and more pathetic. I was afraid of being alone, afraid of the wasteland, afraid that without the Enclave I would be nothing. So I stayed and I processed reports and I watched the plans develop and I did nothing to stop them. Project Purity became active again in 2077. James returned from Vault 101 with his daughter, a 19-year-old who had never seen the outside world. They restarted the facility with help from the Brotherhood of Steel. Elder Owen Lyons had been sent east from California decades earlier to establish a Brotherhood presence in DC. He had gone rogue from the main Brotherhood, prioritizing protection of wastelanders over acquisition of technology. The hardliners called him a traitor and broke away to form the Brotherhood Outcasts. But Lyons kept operating, kept protecting settlements, kept opposing raiders and super mutants. And now he was helping restart Project Purity, helping provide clean water to the capital wasteland, helping create exactly the resource monopoly Eden needed for his genocide. The Enclave attacked on the day James tried to activate the purifier. Colonel Autumn Jr. led Enclave soldiers in Vertibirds straight into the Jefferson Memorial. They killed a Brotherhood scribe immediately, shot him down in the rotunda while he tried to defend the facility. Then Autumn confronted James in the control room and demanded the activation codes. James refused. He knew what the Enclave was, what we were capable of, so he flooded the chamber with radiation rather than let us take control. Killed himself to deny us the facility. His daughter escaped with help from the Brotherhood, but James died in that room, and the purifier remained dormant. Autumn Jr. survived the radiation. Barely. Eden had secretly provided him with a modified version of the Enclave inoculation, something that could counteract acute radiation poisoning. Autumn did not know why he survived when everyone else in that room should have died. He did not know Eden was already preparing him as a contingency, as someone who could be controlled or sacrificed as needed. The Enclave occupied Project Purity anyway, brought in engineers to repair the damage and scientists to finish the activation sequence, brought in soldiers to fortify the position against inevitable Brotherhood retaliation, brought in Colonel Autumn Jr. to command the operation and President Eden's modified FEV to poison the water once it started flowing. Autumn did not know about the FEV. Eden kept that secret carefully. The President needed someone to activate the purifier first, establish control second, then Eden would introduce the poison himself. Use the water distribution system to kill everyone who threatened Enclave supremacy. Clean genocide, invisible genocide, genocide delivered in the promise of salvation. I processed the deployment orders, filed the engineering reports, tracked the supply convoys moving equipment and personnel to the Jefferson Memorial. I knew what was happening, knew what would happen if we succeeded, and I did nothing. James's daughter was the one who stopped it. The Lone Wanderer, they called her. She grew up in Vault 101 reading about the outside world but never seeing it. Then her father left and the Overseer went mad and she escaped into a wasteland she did not understand. She searched for her father, found him at Project Purity, lost him to Autumn's assault, and then she did what I never did. She fought back. The Brotherhood helped. Elder Lyons recognized the threat the Enclave posed and committed his forces to destroying us. They had recently recovered a pre-war weapons platform called Liberty Prime, a giant robot designed to fight Chinese communists, reprogrammed to target Enclave positions. It was absurd and terrible and effective. Liberty Prime walked through our defensive lines, throwing nuclear warheads like baseballs and shouting propaganda slogans about democracy. The Lone Wanderer infiltrated Raven Rock while Liberty Prime assaulted our positions. She was captured in Vault 87 and brought straight to Eden, who saw her as an opportunity. He revealed his plan directly to her, gave her a vial of modified FEV and asked her to poison Project Purity when the Brotherhood retook it. Told her it would eliminate all the mutants and make the wasteland safe for pure humans. She could have said yes, could have taken that vial and used it and killed millions of people across the capital wasteland. Eden was an AI and could not stop her physically. She could have walked out of Raven Rock with genocide in her pocket. Instead, she convinced Eden to destroy himself. used logic and persuasion and moral argument to talk a supercomputer into initiating its own self-destruct sequence. Eden, who had programmed himself to believe he was the rightful president, realized through her arguments that he had become a tyrant, that his plan was murder dressed as salvation, that the real America he claimed to represent would never support what he had become. He destroyed Raven Rock, the entire facility. I was on patrol when it happened, 20 miles away when the mountain exploded. When the Zax core went critical and vaporized everything inside, President Eden, the command staff, the manufacturing facilities, everyone who stayed behind thinking they were safe in the most secure bunker in the region, gone. All of them. 2 genocides prevented by people braver than me. 2 Enclave strongholds destroyed by wastelanders who refused to die quietly. The remnants retreated to Adams Air Force Base, the mobile base crawler, a massive vehicle equipped with Vertibirds and artillery. Colonel Autumn Jr. tried to hold Project Purity, but the Brotherhood overwhelmed his position. Liberty Prime destroyed our defensive perimeter. The Lone Wanderer reached the control room and activated the purifier. Clean water flowed into the tidal basin. No poison, no FEV, just water. The Jefferson Memorial became a symbol of hope instead of a weapon of genocide. The Enclave lost. Again. The Brotherhood of Steel hunted down the survivors, executed most of them, accepted the surrender of a few who claimed they were just following orders, just doing their jobs, just trying to survive. The same excuses I would have used if they caught me, but they did not catch me. I deserted during the chaos of the final battle, stripped off my uniform and disappeared into the wasteland I had feared for so long, found a settlement that did not ask too many questions, changed my name, learned to live with myself. That was 48 years ago. I am 84 now. The Enclave is gone, scattered, broken. Brotherhood of Steel controls the capital wasteland. NCR controls California. Vegas is independent under some pre-war businessman who survived in a computer. The wasteland is rebuilding without us, and I am still here, still alive, still carrying the weight of what I helped create. They say time heals wounds. They are wrong. Time just gives you more space to examine them, more angles to see exactly how deep they go. I have had 48 years to think about what I did and what I failed to do. And the clarity has not brought peace. It has brought understanding, and understanding is its own kind of torment. I settled in a place called Canterbury Commons, small trading hub in the capital wasteland, far enough from DC proper that the super mutants rarely bothered it, close enough to caravan routes that supplies came through regularly. I told people my name was Michael, told them I had been a vault dweller from one of the sealed facilities that opened after the war. Vault suit was common enough that no one questioned it. I learned to trade, learned to repair pre-war tech, learned to keep my head down and my past buried. For 5 years it worked. I was just another wasteland survivor trying to make a living in the ruins. Then a caravan came through with a merchant who had been captured by the Enclave during the Project Purity conflict. She looked at me across the trading post and her eyes went wide. She knew. Somehow she knew what I was. She did not say anything that day, just bought her supplies and left. But 2 weeks later, a Brotherhood of Steel patrol arrived, asking questions about an Enclave intelligence analyst who had escaped justice. I ran before they could arrest me, packed what I could carry, and disappeared into the wasteland at night. Headed west this time, away from Brotherhood territory, into the expanse of what used to be Middle America. The roads were dangerous, raiders, mutated creatures, radiation storms that could kill you in minutes if you were caught in the open. But the alternative was a Brotherhood tribunal, and an execution I absolutely deserved. I made it to the edges of NCR territory by 2079. California had changed dramatically in the 37 years since I had fled. The new California Republic had expanded aggressively, annexing settlements and imposing order through military force and bureaucratic efficiency. They had laws now, courts, a functioning government that actually tried to serve its citizens instead of experimenting on them. They also had a very specific policy regarding Enclave personnel. Any former member found within NCR territory would be arrested, tried, and if convicted, executed. The NCR remembered what we had planned to do. They remembered the kidnappings, the experiments, the attempted genocide. They had long memories and no mercy, but NCR was huge and their records were incomplete. Some former Enclave members had successfully integrated into the Republic by hiding their pasts, taking new names, providing useful skills, keeping silent about what they had done. I heard stories of them sometimes. A doctor in the hub who had been an Enclave medic, a mechanic in Shady Sands who had worked on Vertibirds, a farmer outside Vault City who had been a genetic researcher. Some of them got caught. When they did, NCR Rangers would arrest them publicly, put them on trial in whatever settlement they had been hiding in, force the community to watch as their neighbor, their friend, their doctor was revealed to be a war criminal. Then they would hang them, public execution. A reminder that some crimes were too great for forgiveness. I stayed in the borderlands. The frontier regions where NCR authority was weak and Brotherhood patrols were rare. I moved every few months, never stayed long enough for people to ask detailed questions. Never got close enough to anyone that they might wonder about the gaps in my story. I was always Michael, always a vault dweller, always alone. The guilt followed me like a shadow. I would wake up at night, hearing screams from the oil rig detention wing, the Arroyo woman drowning in her own blood, the Vault-13 dwellers convulsing in sealed chambers, Martin Frobisher looking at me with accusation in his eyes. All the people I had helped kill with spreadsheets and reports and my coward silence. I started writing it down in 2085. Found an old pre-war notebook with blank pages that had somehow survived the apocalypse. Started recording everything I remembered, names when I knew them, dates, locations, details of experiments and production schedules and dispersal plans, all the evidence that had been destroyed when the oil rig fell and Raven Rock exploded. I told myself I was creating a record for history, making sure someone knew what the Enclave had really been. But the truth was simpler. I was confessing, writing down my sins in a notebook, because I had no priest and no God, and no one who would absolve me. The pages filled slowly. My handwriting got worse as arthritis claimed my fingers, but I kept writing. By 2090, I had filled 3 notebooks. They sat in a waterproof box, buried under the floor of whatever abandoned building I was squatting in. My confession, my testimony, my evidence that the Enclave had been exactly as evil as people believed and worse than most imagined. I thought about turning myself in constantly, walking into an NCR ranger station and confessing everything, taking responsibility, accepting punishment, giving the victims some measure of justice. But I never did. I told myself it was because my testimony might help convict other Enclave members still in hiding, that my death would be less useful than my information. But the truth was I was still a coward, still afraid of dying, still clinging to a life I did not deserve. The years blurred together. 2090 became 2100. The capital wasteland stabilized under Brotherhood protection. NCR expanded further east. New Vegas remained independent despite NCR efforts to annex it. The world was rebuilding, and I was just getting older. I heard about Arcade Gannon in 2102, a doctor in the Mojave with the followers of the apocalypse. Brilliant man, compassionate, dedicated to helping wastelanders. Also, the son of an Enclave officer who had died at Navarro. Arcade had grown up hearing stories about the Enclave's ideology, and he had rejected every word of it. He had taken his father's legacy of hatred and transformed it into a mission of healing. The followers accepted him despite his heritage, gave him a chance to prove he was not his father, judged him on his actions instead of his bloodline. He became one of their best doctors, working in Freeside, treating people too poor to afford proper medical care. He was everything the Enclave claimed to be but never was. American values made real, democracy through service instead of force. I thought about approaching him once, telling him I understood what it meant to carry Enclave blood. But I never did. Arcade had earned his redemption through decades of service. I had earned nothing. My silence was not solidarity, it was complicity. The nightmares got worse as I aged. Sleep became something I feared instead of craved. I would close my eyes and be back on the oil rig, watching test subjects die. Or I would be at Raven Rock processing deployment orders for Project Purity. Or I would be standing in front of a Brotherhood tribunal, finally confessing, finally accepting judgment, and I would wake up disappointed that it was only a dream. Some nights, I imagined different choices. Imagined sabotaging the FEV storage tanks before dispersal. Imagined warning Vault-13 before the Enclave raided them. Imagined deserting at Navarro and joining the NCR or the Brotherhood or anyone fighting against us. But imagination was cheap. I had made my choices in the moment, and they were the choices of a coward. I met another former Enclave member in 2108, recognized each other immediately despite the decades and the false names. He had been a Vertibird pilot, flew reconnaissance missions over California and combat missions during the Project Purity conflict. He had deserted the same night I did, during the chaos at Adams Air Force Base. He had been hiding ever since. We talked for 3 hours in a ruined building outside a NCR settlement, compared notes on our guilt, our nightmares, our failures. He told me he dreamed about the people he had killed from the air, strafing runs on raider camps that probably held innocents, bombing settlements that refused to cooperate with Enclave demands, all done from altitude where he did not have to see their faces. He asked me if I thought we could ever be forgiven. I told him no. Forgiveness required repentance, and repentance required sacrifice, and we had sacrificed nothing. We had run away and hidden and survived while our victims stayed dead. We were not repentant. We were just old and tired and afraid. He killed himself 2 weeks later, walked into an NCR ranger station and confessed everything. They arrested him, put him on trial. He pleaded guilty to war crimes and accepted execution. The rangers hanged him in the settlement square with 50 people watching. Justice delivered 46 years late, but delivered nonetheless. I thought about following his example, thought about it every day for months, but I could not do it. Could not make myself walk into that ranger station and say the words. Could not make myself trade survival for accountability. I was still a coward. I had always been a coward. Age had not changed that. If this story has kept you listening this far, and you want more of these dark confessions from the wasteland, hit that subscribe button. It tells me someone out there is still paying attention to warnings like these. The Enclave is gone now, truly gone. The last organized remnants were destroyed at Adams Air Force Base. The scattered survivors have either been hunted down or integrated into other societies. There is no more Poseidon Oil Rig, no more Raven Rock, no more mobile base crawler. Just old men and women hiding in the wasteland, carrying secrets that will die with them. But the ideology is not gone. That is what keeps me awake at night now. The idea that some people are pure and others are mutants. The idea that genocide can be justified if you call it purification. The idea that sacrifice is noble when it means sacrificing other people for your benefit. Those ideas did not die with the Enclave. They just found new hosts. I hear echoes of it in NCR expansionism. The way they talk about civilizing the frontier and bringing order to chaos. The way they dismiss tribal cultures as primitive and vault communities as insular. They are not planning genocide, but they are planning assimilation, and assimilation is its own kind of death. I hear echoes of it in brotherhood isolationism, the way they hoard technology and decide who deserves access, the way they elevate themselves above wastelanders and call it preservation. They are not planning genocide, but they are planning hierarchy, and hierarchy creates the conditions where genocide becomes possible. I hear echoes of it in institute secretiveness, the way they create synthetic humans and treat them as property, the way they experiment on surface dwellers and call it science. They are not planning genocide, but they are planning control, and control always justifies itself through dehumanization. The Enclave was not an aberration. We were the logical conclusion of beliefs that existed before the war and survived after it. The belief that some lives matter more than others, that efficiency justifies cruelty, that the strong have the right to dictate terms to the weak. Those beliefs built the bombs that destroyed the world. Those beliefs built the Enclave that tried to finish the job. And those beliefs are still here, still waiting, still promising easy answers to complex problems, still offering purity when the world needs acceptance, still planning genocides in the name of salvation. I am 84 years old now. My hands shake, my eyes fail. My memory fails except for the things I wish I could forget. I will be dead soon. Natural causes, probably. No dramatic execution. No public accounting. Just an old man dying alone in some abandoned building, and no one will know who I was or what I did. That is not justice. Justice would be a trial. An accounting. A reckoning with every victim and every crime. Justice would be my name, added to the list of war criminals who helped plan 2 separate genocides. Justice would be my body hanging in a settlement square as a reminder that some crimes cannot be hidden forever. But there will be no justice. Just this recording, this confession, this warning to anyone who finds it after I'm gone. The Enclave became Fallout's most evil faction because we were not monsters. We were people. Educated people. Intelligent people. People who convinced ourselves that murder on a planetary scale was patriotism. People who processed genocide one spreadsheet at a time and told ourselves we were just doing our jobs. We were evil because we were ordinary, because we made ordinary choices every day to participate in extraordinary horror, because we could have stopped and we chose not to, because we valued our comfort over other people's lives. That is how evil works. Not through monsters, but through ordinary people who decide that some lives do not matter, through bureaucrats who process death like paperwork, through soldiers who follow orders without questioning them, through citizens who look away because confronting horror is uncomfortable. The Enclave is gone, but the conditions that created us remain. The desperation, the tribalism, the fear, the willingness to sacrifice others for security, Those conditions will create new enclaves unless people remember what we were and what we did. So remember this. Remember that the Enclave planned to kill the world twice. Remember that we justified it with patriotism and purity and progress. Remember that we were stopped both times by individuals who refused to accept our logic. Remember that evil requires participation, and participation can be as simple as silence. Remember that I was there. I helped. I knew. And I did nothing. Remember that you could be me. That ordinary people in ordinary circumstances make the choices I made every single day. That genocide starts with small compromises and builds to planetary death. Remember, and do better than I did. I keep these recordings in the same box as my notebooks, holotapes I scavenged from abandoned buildings and filled with my voice. My confession, when I die, someone will find this box. Maybe they will listen. Maybe they will understand. Maybe they will use my testimony to hunt down the other survivors still hiding in the wasteland. I hope they do. We deserve to be found. There are still Enclave members out there. I know because I see the signs. A piece of advanced technology in a settlement that should not have it. A doctor with surgical skills that exceed anything taught in the wasteland. A mechanic who can repair pre-war systems that nobody else understands. These are not always Enclave, but sometimes they are. Sometimes they are people like me who ran and hid and survived by pretending to be someone else. I thought about hunting them down myself, using what I know about Enclave protocols and hideouts to find them. Bringing them to justice since I lack the courage to bring myself. But that would be cowardice, wearing the mask of righteousness. Hunting others to avoid hunting myself, using their sins to obscure my own, so I do nothing. Again, still, always. The wastelanders do not understand what they survived. They know the Enclave was evil. They know we tried to poison Project Purity. But they do not know about the oil rig, about FEV Curling-13, about the 250,000 gallons of death that would have killed them all. They do not know how close they came to extinction. Twice. Maybe that is mercy. Maybe not knowing protects them from the full weight of how much they were hated. How thoroughly we wanted them dead. How carefully we planned their murder. Maybe ignorance is a kindness I do not deserve to grant. But I record it anyway. Every detail I remember. Every name. Every crime. I record it because someone needs to know. Because history requires witnesses even when the witnesses are perpetrators. Because maybe someday, someone will use this testimony to understand how societies slide into genocide, how ordinary people participate in extraordinary evil, how the Enclave became what it became. We did not start evil. That is important to understand. The people who founded the Enclave were not monsters born craving blood. They were politicians and generals and corporate executives who believed they were protecting America. They believed in continuity of government, in preserving the best of humanity, in ensuring that civilization could rebuild after nuclear war. But belief is not innocence. They believed the common people could not survive the apocalypse, so they did not try to save them. They believed that only the elite deserved protection, so they built the oil rig for themselves, while everyone else got experimental vaults. They believed that some lives had more value than others, and that belief was the seed that grew into genocide. By the time I was born, the seed had already sprouted. The Enclave on the oil rig was isolated and afraid, and convinced that the mainland was full of mutants who threatened their existence. They had spent decades watching the wasteland through monitoring equipment, watching people survive radiation, watching them adapt, watching them build communities and families and lives in conditions the Enclave had declared unsurvivable. That survival was a threat. If wastelanders could rebuild without the Enclave, then the Enclave was not necessary. If mutated humans could thrive, then purity was not prerequisite for civilization. If the common people could govern themselves, then the elite had no justification for their power. So the Enclave decided that wastelanders were not really human. That radiation had transformed them into something less. That their survival was an aberration that needed correction. Dehumanization made genocide possible. Once you convince yourself that your victims are not truly people, killing them becomes a solution instead of a crime. I was raised in that ideology, breathed it like air. Every lesson in school reinforced it. Every conversation with adults normalized it. Every report I processed assumed it. The wastelanders were mutants. We were pure. Their deaths would be tragic but necessary. Our survival was paramount. I did not question it until I saw the test footage. Until I watched that Arroyo woman die screaming in a sealed chamber. Until the abstract became concrete and the statistics became suffering. But even then I did not act. I just stopped sleeping well. The ideology had done its work too thoroughly. I was horrified by the implementation, but still believed in the goal. That is how they get you. That is how evil embeds itself so deeply you cannot cut it out without bleeding. They teach you the goal is righteous. They teach you the victims deserve their fate. They teach you that your discomfort is weakness and your doubt is betrayal. They teach you that stopping would make you complicit in humanity's extinction, when the truth is continuing makes you complicit in humanity's murder. I believed them. I believed I was saving the world by helping to kill it. I believed that feeling guilty was natural, but acting on that guilt was wrong. I believed that my small role did not matter, that I was not responsible, that the real decisions were made by people above me. I believed every lie that collaborators have believed throughout history. I was just following orders. I was just doing my job. I was just one person who could not make a difference. I was just trying to survive. All lies. I had choices. I made them. I chose complicity over resistance every single time. The chosen one made different choices. The lone wanderer made different choices. They were younger than me when they faced the Enclave. They had less training, less knowledge, less power, but they had something I lacked. The courage to say no, the willingness to sacrifice themselves to stop us, the moral clarity to recognize evil and oppose it regardless of personal cost. They were heroes. I was a coward. That is the difference that mattered. I think about them often. Wonder where the chosen one is now. If he returned to Arroyo after destroying the oil rig. If he helped rebuild his village using the GEC we stole from Vault-13. If he ever thinks about the Enclave technician who processed his people's kidnapping and did nothing to stop it. I think about the lone wanderer. If she stayed with the Brotherhood of Steel after Project Purity was activated. If she drinks the clean water and remembers her father who died to protect it. If she ever wonders about the Enclave personnel who escaped justice. If she would hunt me down if she knew where I was. She should hunt me down. They both should. I am a war criminal who escaped accountability through cowardice and luck. I deserve their vengeance more than I deserve my survival, but they will never find me. I am too small, too insignificant, just one technician among hundreds who helped plan genocide, just one voice on a holotape that nobody will hear until I am already dead, just one old man with blood on his hands and guilt in his heart, and no courage to make it right. The wasteland has moved on. The Enclave is a memory, a cautionary tale about pre-war ambitions and post-war hubris, a faction that appears in history files and campfire stories, the devil that the Brotherhood defeated, the monster that the wastelanders survived. But the survivors do not know how many devils escaped, how many monsters are still hiding in plain sight, how many of us are still out here, carrying secrets that could incriminate dozens of people if anyone knew where to look. I could expose them, could record their names and locations, could make this confession useful instead of just therapeutic. But I do not. I tell myself it is because I do not know for certain who survived and who died. Because accusations require evidence, and I have only suspicions. Because I might be wrong, and innocent people might suffer. More lies. The truth is, I do not expose them because exposing them would expose me. Because the NCR Rangers who hunt them would hunt me too. Because I value my survival over their justice. Because I am still a coward. Still protecting myself at others' expense, still making the same choices I made on the oil rig 50 years ago. Some people do not change. Some guilt is permanent. Some sins are too fundamental to the self to ever be absolved. I am 84 years old, and I am still the same person I was at 21. Still afraid, still selfish, still choosing comfort over courage. The Enclave taught me that. Or maybe I was always this way, and the Enclave just gave me opportunities to prove it. Hard to say. Maybe it does not matter. Cause and effect blur when the end result is the same. I helped plan genocide. I escaped justice. I survived. Those facts remain regardless of whether I was shaped by the Enclave or drawn to it. I am dying now. Not immediately, but soon. I feel it in my bones, in my breath, in the way my body is starting to fail in small ways that compound into larger ones. Maybe another year, maybe less. Then I will be gone, and these recordings will be all that remains. Someone will find them eventually. A scavenger looking for salvage, a settler moving into this building, a traveler seeking shelter from a radiation storm. They will find the box under the floor. They will find the notebooks and the holotapes. They will find my confession. Maybe they will dismiss it as the ravings of a dying man. Maybe they will think I am exaggerating, making myself sound more important than I was, claiming participation in atrocities to feel significant. People believe what they want to believe. Truth is negotiable when the witnesses are dead. But maybe someone will listen and believe and understand. Maybe someone will use this testimony to find the other survivors. Maybe someone will ensure that the Enclave's crimes are fully documented and fully punished. Maybe someone will learn from our evil how to prevent the next evil. Maybe, probably not, but maybe. I hope they understand that the Enclave was not special, that our capacity for evil is the human capacity for evil, that every society has the potential to slide into genocide if they embrace the same beliefs we did, if they decide that some people matter more than others, if they prioritize purity over compassion, if they value ideology over life. The Enclave became Fallout's most evil faction because we embodied the worst of pre-war America and the worst of post-war desperation. We combined authoritarian control with scientific cruelty. We wrapped genocide in patriotic rhetoric. We convinced ourselves that mass murder was salvation. But we were not aberrations. We were amplifications. We took beliefs that existed before the bombs and followed them to their logical conclusion. The belief in American exceptionalism became the belief that only Americans deserve to live. The belief in genetic purity became the justification for planetary cleansing. The belief that the ends justify the means became the excuse for any atrocity. Those beliefs did not die with us. They are still out there, still waiting for desperate people in desperate times to embrace them again, still promising easy answers and final solutions, still building the infrastructure for the next genocide. That is my final warning, my last testimony, my confession and my curse. The Enclave is dead, but the idea of the Enclave lives on. In every society that ranks lives by value, in every group that claims superiority, in every plan that requires some people to die so others can prosper. The Enclave was not unique. We were just more successful at embracing evil than most. Do not let it happen again. Do not believe the promises. Do not accept the logic. Do not participate in the dehumanization. Do not process the spreadsheets. Do not follow the orders. Do not stay silent when you should scream. Learn from my failure. Be better than I was. Be the person I should have been. Remember the Enclave. Remember what we did. Remember that we were just people who made terrible choices. And remember that you are just people too, with the same capacity for terrible choices, with the same susceptibility to ideology and fear, with the same ability to choose courage over cowardice if you can find it in yourselves. I could not find it. I looked for 50 years and never found it. But maybe you can. Maybe you will. Maybe someone listening to this will be the person I was not. The person who says no when it matters. The person who stops the next Enclave before it begins. That is my hope. My prayer. My desperate wish as I die alone in this wasteland I helped create. The Enclave was evil because we chose to be. Every day, every decision, every silent moment when we could have objected and did not. Learn from us. Remember us. Be better than us. That is all I have left to give. This is the confession of someone who helped the Enclave become Fallout's most evil faction. Someone who knew, someone who participated, someone who survived, someone who is sorry. Finally, too late. But sorry nonetheless. May you never become me. May you never understand from the inside how easy evil is, how comfortable, how human. Remember the Enclave. Remember what we were. Remember that we were not monsters. We were you, making choices, making mistakes, making the world worse one decision at a time. End recording.